Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our spring lecture series. Everybody's just logging in, so we'll give everybody some time. Let me make sure I've enabled the chat. There we go. So everybody, you're welcome to write in the chat where you're joining us from. Love to hear from y'all. So we've got Mary Martinez Tuttle from Miami. Greetings to you, Mary. Thanks for joining us. I see Arlene and Roland from Ignatius Chapel Community. Israel Diaz, a dear old friend and colleague of ours at LIM. Thank you for joining. Courtney from Texas, our student. So great to have you. Yvonne, more students. Thank you. Thank you. We got Danny from Cleveland. Kevin, Father Kevin from DC. Thanks for joining us. I'm missing some names. You guys are going fast. I want to get everybody's name here. Yvonne, thanks for joining us. And Bridget. Who else do we have? Teresa from Los Angeles. Wonderful. The sun must be up and shining where you are. Kimberly from Atlanta. Jeff, College Station, Texas. Thanks for being here. Barbara from Chicago. Luis from Gabo from NOLA. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Christina, Cleveland, Ohio. Fantastic. We got people from all around the country. Utah, Pam, good to see you. A U.S. tour. Yes, it is, Mary. Bernard from Lafayette, close by. Thank you. Vimla, oh, so good to have you, Vimla. Haven't had you in class in so long. We have a Loyola alum from Kenner. Good to see you, Susan. Wonderful to have y'all. Jovi, hooray! Dr. Castillo and I got to meet Jovi, one of our students, when we were in LA in February. So that was a delight. But I've met you twice, so. Sister Lucy from South Africa, how fantastic. Yes, international. Oh, Jane from Louisville, how great. This is so wonderful. What an amazing crew we have, y'all. I am so delighted you've all joined us. This is going to be such a wonderful evening. Victoria from Florida, thanks for being with us, Victoria. So keep feeling free to plug that into the chat. We're going to get started in probably just one more minute. It always takes people a couple minutes to come on. And so we're real excited tonight. We have dynamo speakers, and I can't wait. Oh, Dr. Ryan's on. Dr. Ryan from LIM. How fantastic. This is going to be a wonderful session tonight. I'm so grateful. You are all in for a treat. This is our third lecture in our series and our third and final one. So we very clearly saved the best for last. Is there not a song about that? I think so. Oh, we should have started with that, Francisco. So wonderful to have you all. So I think we will absolutely go ahead and get started. So I am so delighted to welcome everyone into this wonderful virtual and physical space that you are all occupying. This is our Loyola Institute for Ministry 2024 Spring Lecture Series, Navigating Difference, Celebrating Unity, the Promise of Synodality for Polarized Church. And tonight we are honored for our third lecture in this series, Convivio in Synodality, a U.S. Hispanic Latino response to polarization in our church. If you missed the first two lectures in our series with Father Raphael Luciani and Cynthia Bailey-Mans, hang on, let me make sure I'm sending this to everyone, can find those recordings right there on LIM's website. I just dropped it in the chat. And welcome again, Nelson. We got the last one in there. Thanks for joining us from Florida. So I am delighted tonight to introduce our speakers. And at the close, I will do some remarks about how fantastic LIM is and how all of our students on this on this webinar should tell all their friends to come and study with us. And every one of you are more than welcome to be a part of our beautiful LIM community. So tonight, I am deeply honored to welcome Dr. Francisco Castillo. Francisco is the Joe and Kelly George Visiting Professor of Pastoral Studies here at LIM. He received his Doctor of Ministry degree from Barry University. While pursuing his degree, he focused on the area of liturgical aesthetics and social justice. He's served as an adjunct professor in the Theology and Philosophy Department at Barry, at the Southeast Pastoral Institute, and in the Humanities and Communication Department at Broward College. He also worked as a senior editor and multicultural specialist at RCL Benziger Publishing. As a Catholic educator for the Diocese of Miami, he taught high school and served as a theology department chair and director of campus ministry. Dr. Castillo has taught courses at the graduate and undergraduate levels in English and Spanish, including Introduction to Religion, Comparative Religion, Peace and Justice, and so many more. He's a member of the Academy of Catholic Hispanic Theologians of the United States and a member of the National Hispanic Institute of Liturgy and a member of Scala. His research interests include Catholic social teaching, liturgical theology, theopoesis, liturgical and theological aesthetics, liberation theology, U.S. Hispanic Latino theology, catechetics, religious studies, comparative religion, religion and film, and cultural identity. You do a lot, Dr. Castillo. And he's written and published for the Journal of Hispanic and Latino Theology on some of these topics. He is also a writer and a poet. Welcome, Dr. Castillo. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Lamont. It's such a pleasure to be here in great company. It's such a humbling experience to be invited to speak on synodality, especially following Dr. Rafael Luciani and Dr. Cynthia Bailey-Mons, who were our presenters for the past sessions that we've had. And it's such an honor to be part of LIM. It's such an honor to be part of this great Institute for Ministry, where we try to form so many people who are already working in ministry throughout the United States and internationally, as we can see. So I thank you for this opportunity to speak on such a topic that I find very, very interesting, which is the whole synodal process that Pope Francis has invited us to be a part of this in this last few years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen.
I'll stop you real quick. I'm going to introduce Carolina first. Sorry about that. So I'm delighted to welcome one of our LIM graduates, very recent graduate. So another congratulations, Carolina. So Carolina Fierro-Amador is a cradle-Catholic Mexican immigrant living in Northeast Mississippi since 2002. She's the general manager in a small family-owned company and has served in the St. James Greater Parish in Tupelo in a variety of ministries, including English and Spanish as a second language, Hispanic Evangelization Committee member, lector, Eucharistic minister, pre-marriage talks, RCIA, church history for 8th graders, and confirmation preparation. She is married with 4 beautiful children in heaven and 4 wonderful children walking with her and her husband. She graduated from LIM and the LIMX program in 2023, so did both programs. Welcome, Carolina. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy and grateful to be here. Thank you.
We're just delighted to have you both. So we are going to take our cameras off, and Dr. Castillo, you are welcome to take it away, my friend. We are very excited to hear from you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse my eagerness to jump into the topic, but Carolina is a former student of mine, and she will present a great response to this presentation that I'm about to give. So I will share my screen. I do have a PowerPoint that I will share with you. And the topic that I was asked to speak on is Convivio in Synodality, a U.S. Hispanic Latino response to polarization in the church. So I want to start with this idea of Convivio first, and why I chose this concept, this idea, to sort of provide a lens for us to understand what is happening, not only with this synodal process, but also how this can be, or not how it can be. I am going to argue that it is how the U.S. Hispanic Latino people respond to what is happening in the church and in our society. So first, a brief definition of convivio. Convivio is a noun which in Spanish, it refers to sort of like a party or a banquet that is offered by someone, by a guest, by a group of people. And it is offered to celebrate camaraderie, rapprochement, familiarity, It denotes affability, congeniality. The closest word that I can think of in the English language is convivial. When we say someone is convivial, we are talking about that the person is friendly, very joyous, very cheerful. So this concept that I believe is central to our understanding of how U.S. Hispanics and Hispanic Latino people in general live our life. So that's the key that I am going to be utilizing tonight to discuss the process of the synod as we face all the polarization that we encounter in our church and in our nation. So the synod, just another brief description, it's been conceived in the Catholic Church as a formal assembly of bishops. We can think of the 1971 Synod of Bishops that produced a wonderful document about peace and justice, justice and peace, from 1971, a few years after the Second Vatican Council. And the idea that a synod is that the bishops are convened by the Pope and they gather to deliberate on matters of faith, doctrine, discipline, pastoral care. There have been other synods on the family quite recently. So it is a gathering of bishops. It has traditionally been a gathering of bishops. The Pope wants a synodal church. The Pope wants the church to find itself, to see itself in this process of gathering together, which the word comes from the Greek synodos, which means gathering together, or even walking together, journeying together, but journeying together in mutual dialogue, collaboration, respect, and discernment. So the synods, and specifically with the emphasis that Pope Francis is giving to this synodal process, is that it is meant to encourage a decentralized and a participatory approach to governance and decision-making processes in the Catholic Church. So we might hear that a critique, or some people that may not understand what the synodal process is about, they say, well, it's about a democratization of the church, but it's not a democratic process that is the Pope is introducing in the church, but it's that idea that all of us are walking, journeying together, and making decisions as we listen to each other along the way. And the theme for this synodal process that started in 2021 is communion, participation, and mission. The reality of our society, our world, is that there is polarization, there are divisions within the church. And this could be attributed to many, many factors, variety of reasons as to why we find ourselves in a polarized church and society. So there are disagreements on doctrine. There are disagreements on moral theology. We keep hearing about arguments pro and against certain liturgical practices in the church, what the role of the laity should be, clericalism, and whatnot. And all of these differences are exacerbated, in my opinion, by the social cultural shifts that we are experiencing, especially here in the United States. Partisan politics, there's a great deal of economic inequality that is growing bigger and bigger. We have experienced racism and all the trauma that comes with that. We have experienced colonization and the reaction, the pushback against this colonizing mentality, and other factors such as globalization, etc. All of these are more evident, and perhaps we're more aware of that. And also, my argument is that the media also has a very profound influence in what's happening, or how we perceive ourselves to be so polarized. So, distrust of institutions, etc. So, in this reality that we see in church and society, what I would like to suggest is that the U.S. Hispanic theologians, Latino theologians, are offering a different perspective on how we can address, and my argument again is that we address this polarization and this very difficult reality that we're experiencing. So if we have, we may have some familiarity with the work of Roberto Goizueta, a U.S. Hispanic theologian that introduces this concept of fiesta. And he has a very interesting article called Fiesta, Life in the Subjunctive Mood. And here, Dr. Goizueta, Professor Goizueta, explores the cultural concepts of fiesta within the U.S. Hispanic Latino experience and reality. And he is very eloquent as to what the ethical and theological implications are of understanding our reality in the U.S. Hispanic Latino experience from this perspective of fiesta. He says the concept of fiesta serves as a locus theologicus, a place from where we do our theology that is characterized by a sense of communal joy, solidarity, and hope. So Professor Goizueta is not talking about fiesta in the party sense, in the understanding of a party, but it's a way of being that is not fixed, that is not predetermined, but rather that opens us up to the possibilities and the potentialities of who we are and what could be. And that's why the subtitle of his article is Life in the Subjunctive Mood, which in the Spanish grammar, we have 4 different moods or different modes, if you will, of how we conjugate the verbs. And the subjunctive mood expresses desires, the hopes, uncertainties, and hypothetical situations that could arise or that should arise. So how I take Professor Goizueta's idea of life in the subjunctive mood is that it reflects or it points to a worldview that embraces ambiguity and at the same time is open to the future. In other words, Professor Goizueta says that a subjunctive approach to life speaks to about what ought to be. So based on Professor Goizueta's idea, I want to discuss my understanding of convivio. Convivio in our everyday speech in Spanish could refer to a party, a gathering, like I said it at the beginning, when we gather to celebrate. So convivio as a locus theologicus means that we share life. The very word itself, convivio, means the sharing, the gifting of life, the sharing of life, to offer other people life-giving opportunities, specifically to those who are in need. So more than fiesta, okay, which the fiesta is celebration that stems from the communal joy, that it could talk about even how we resist by envisioning, imagining the possibilities of what ought to be, that can help the U.S. Hispanic people, especially living in a different culture than our own, that we can claim our own identity or reclaim our own identity. So my suggestion is that instead of what ought to be, which is the subjunctive mood that Professor Goizueta makes reference to me, a convivio points to what is, the indicative. And more specifically, when we take the infinitive of the word, of the verb convivir, which to me speaks very, very straightforward about the action of this, or the state of being, of where I share my life, where I make a committed effort to share my life willingly with those that are my neighbors. So convivir means to live together, to live with, to accompany is a word that I will be addressing a little bit more later. But convivir means that I make a concerted effort to share my life with, and convidar means to offer, to engage in life-giving action, to invite others. When we literally want to invite someone to something, to share our life or to share from what we have, we say, te voy a convidar, I am going to invite you to, I'm going to share, or like I said, to give, to offer life-giving actions. My ethics is informed by that idea. So invite others to share in my own very life. So convivir, convivio, convidar, to me speaks of an ethics that is lived in the everyday, in lo cotidiano. To me, I see it as a realized ethics that translates ideas of what ought to be into concrete actions and behaviors in life of what is. It invites us to extend a life-giving options to those we encounter. Because to me, this idea of convivir stresses that the moral agent invites, welcomes, offers hospitality for others to be in communion by engaging in what I call salvific acts in the here and the now. So a very clear example of convidar and convivio are a group of women from Veracruz, Mexico, who risk their lives by offering these life-giving activities to aid thousands of migrant workers who ride this freight train that traverses all of Mexico from Chiapas, the southern part of Mexico, all the way to the U.S. border. And it is known as La Bestia. It is a freight train that carries migrant workers that are fleeing their countries in Central America. And these women, known as Las Patronas, or the patron saints, or the bosses, have this wonderful initiative, we would say a wonderful ministry, where they offer life-giving opportunities for the people that are on that train. So I have a short video that I will play for you. But in order to do that, I need to disconnect. I'm sorry for the technical. I need to disconnect my Bluetooth so that you can hear what it is that I am going to play. So I apologize for this technical change here. And here we go.
These women risk their lives to feed the migrants on La Bestia, ominously known as the Train of Death. Each year, thousands of migrants from Latin America climb onto this freight train to escape poverty and violence, risking injuries, kidnapping, trafficking, hunger, and even death on this harrowing journey. In 1995, Norma Romero Vasquez and her family were on their way home from the grocery store when La Bestia rode by their town of La Patrona, Mexico. Hearing the migrants aboard pleading for food and water, they handed over everything in their hands. This experience led the Romero Vasquez family to dedicate their lives to feeding the migrants on La Bestia. Every day, they cook and package hundreds of meals to deliver to those aboard the train. Despite the risk of injury and reported threats from local authorities and criminal groups, the women are determined to continue their life-saving work. The family operation has continued to grow and is now known as Las Patronas, a reference to the name of their hometown. Fittingly, Las Patronas also means the bosses or the patron saints. This year, Las Patronas celebrated its 28th year in action. As the displacement crisis continues to grow globally, groups like Las Patronas offer symbols of human kindness and hope for Latin American migrants on their difficult journey to seek a better future.
Okay. All right. So that is Las Patronas, and they, from what, the way I understand it, the way that I see their work is that they live this idea of convivio very very purposefully in their lives. So you can find them on social media. You could research them. They have been around for 28 years. They have received numerous awards from different places. People recognize the work that they do. So as an example of this life-giving agency that these women perform, I started thinking as to what would convivio in synodality look like. Well, like I mentioned earlier, synodality speaks of journeying together. So convivio in synodality places emphasis on our communal discernment, the fact that we attempt to be inclusive as possible, open to the movements of the Holy Spirit within our lives as we're journeying together. So the Holy Spirit allows us to listen to the Holy Spirit and speaks through the people of God and informs the ethical decisions that we made through a process of listening, dialogue, and discerning as church, as community. So Convivio Synodality speaks of this active participation of all. It helps us to understand and to value the diversity that we find within our churches, within our cult, within our communities, and that this experience brings us to address situations from a communal perspective. We're open to being attentive to the signs of the time, and it prompts us to be responsive to the challenges of the present moment. I also see Convivio as something that is very, very theological. And here I'm going to borrow a phrase from one of the presenters earlier, Dr. Cynthia Bailey Mans, who reminded us that synodality is not a process, but a relationship. And to me, when I hear relationship, I see it as the community being in relationship with each other and modeled after the Trinity. So this idea that Convivio is grounded based on communal relationships, it's quite theological, and more than that is Trinitarian for me, because it speaks of that interconnectedness and collaboration. So the concept of perichoresis, this theological term that speaks of the dynamic, loving relationship between the divine persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, who participate in the life of the other, yet maintain their distinct identity. So it's like a dance. It's like the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, dancing, rejoicing in that communal, eternal, divine life that they share and that they ask us to share in that life as well. So Convivio Synodality is about solidarity. It recognizes the dignity and the fact that all of us are interconnected. The theme that the Pope wants us to concentrate on the synodal process is communion, participation, and mission. So if we see Convivio as a source, content, and context from where we do theology, then what does that look like? Well, it means that we are to encounter with love, we are to listen with empathy, and we are to discern prayerfully how our response is going to be to what God is asking us to do. And I came across the work of Dr. Miguel Díaz de la Torre, another U.S. Hispanic theologian, and he points to us the idea that hope is a first world white Eurocentric construct that is designed to appease the communities of color. And I find this very interesting, very thought-provoking. And in my reading of Dr. de la Torre, I don't think that he is speaking of the theological virtue of hope, but he is summoning us. He's telling us that we must embrace that hopelessness that we encounter in our poverty, in our marginalization that we experience, in that abject poverty that the great majority of the world lives in. And that hopelessness is what should prompt us, is what should empower us to act. So hopelessness is what leads to a radical liberative praxis. That's what Dr. de la Torre says. And I immediately compare this to what was happening in the road to Emmaus, where the disciples are migrating. There is this sense, and traditionally we talk about them as pilgrims on the road to Emmaus, but they are fleeing the violence, the institutional terror that they have experienced when their master is brutally killed, nailed to a cross. And the resurrected Christ encounters the disciples, and in love, he listens empathetically to what they're going through, and then he offers a prayerful response to their needs. And if we continue reading the pericope from Luke, we know that he invites them or they invite him to stay. So they have a convivio. They offer life to this stranger that's walking along with them. And then when they celebrate the meal, when they extend hospitality, that's when they really begin to understand that, when they realize that it is the resurrected Christ. So it's a very powerful passage. And to me, I see this is sort of like the work of the patronas in Veracruz, Mexico. They're on a synodal path in the sense that they're open to listening to the cries of those people that they don't know, that come, that go through their town, and they invite them to eat. So there's a powerful statement that one of them says, that I find very, very interesting about this concept of convivio. There should not be borders at our tables. In other words, everyone is welcome here, no matter where you're coming from, no matter what's happening in your life. They have made their enterprise, their kitchen even, a political agency to help deal with this. And I say political because they're addressing issues that are very present, very important for us to consider in our society. But they themselves say that they're non-partisan politics. They understand that their agency needs to be involved with what's happening by feeding the poor, by offering those salvific actions that they encounter. So hopelessness in Las Patronas is transformed into action, which to me speaks of what praxis is all about. So briefly to go back to Roberto Goizueta, he has another seminal work called Caminemos con Jesús, Let's Walk with Jesus. And here he talks about acompañamiento, accompaniment. And here he spells out that our theology from the U.S. Hispanic Latino perspective is grounded in the historical experiences of who we are. And the idea of walking is, for him, a concrete expression of that solidarity with each other on a day-to-day struggles that we encounter. And that we, the U.S. Hispanic Latino people, we perceive God as walking with God's people. So he talks about the communal aspect of who we are, not individualistic, but we're always in solidarity with those who suffer. Back in the 80s, 70s, 90s, in places like Chile and other places, the poor people would have these communal kitchens where they would share the food that they had with everyone in their bodies, with everyone in their town. So that's what I mean, a solidarity with those who suffer. So Roberto Goizueta grants Hispanic Latino anthropology, in the experience of community and relationships. But what I would like to add to Professor Goizueta's idea of Caminemos con Jesús, which is the imperative mood, is not that let us walk with Jesus, is that caminamos con Jesús, in the indicative, we walk with Jesus. So Convivio, to me, points to the indicative again, not that we let us walk with Jesus, but we walk with Jesus in the U.S. Hispanic Latino theology. Another great U.S. Hispanic theologian offers this seminal work called Maps for a Fiesta, and Professor Maduro believes that this is a metaphorical framework for understanding pluralism in church and society, that a map points to the diverse path that we take to peace, to spirituality, and to cultural fulfillment. And for him, just like for Goizueta, the fiesta is the ultimate destination. For Maduro, the fiesta represents that shared human experience of seeking meaning, connection, and transcendence. So it encourages for us to have a pluralistic approach to understanding, for us to be inclusive, for us to be respectful of the diverse spiritual cultural traditions that exist in our society, while recognizing the common goals that lead people to the celebration of life and unity. So for Maduro, respect, tolerance for diversity means that the other person, my neighbor, is not a competitor or my adversary. it is my brother, my sister, and that I should appreciate the richness of the different paths that engage with others in the spiritual mutual understanding and collaboration. In other words, this is what Convivio is all about. And the synodal way is that map, that path, or that map of hope uh, that will build communion through accompaniment. And I came across, back when I was in undergraduate studies, Dante Alighieri, and we know this poet from the Renaissance to be, he's the one who wrote the Divine Comedy, where he speaks of hell, purgatory, and paradise, and it symbolizes how the human person ascends through these stages of life. And I find particular that he says that at the gates of hell, it is written at the entrance, lasciate ogni speranza, abandon all hope. So I find it interesting that when Dante himself experiences exile, he writes this other beautiful poem called Il Convivio, and where he talks about the ethical vision that puts us in touch with the importance of the life of virtue, that we should seek to achieve the common good of all, and justice, peace, and love are the virtues that are essential for true happiness, for human fulfillment, and to bring us closer to the divine. So the Il Convivio that Dante speaks reminds me that when we answer, when we look to what the synodal process is all about, it has to be in that key of life affirming, life offering ethical action, where we go from contemplation to action, when we utilize poesis, praxis, and techne to achieve that human excellence that the Greeks and the classical world sought for us to be able to achieve excellence in life. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Castillo. That was just fantastic. I loved the way, Goizueta is so formative in our theologies. Many people's theologies should be more people's theologies. But you pushed it, and you said, there's got to be something more. And that's what I love about the evolution of our tradition. We are constantly asked to read the signs of the times. And so, rather than what ought to be, what is, Convivio points to what is. And I love the way that you use the example of the patronas, the patron saints. They're giving their lives. They are not just helping, but they're also giving their lives. And that really illustrated Convivio so beautifully, and so did everything else you were mentioning. But just the thought of, it's just struck me so much that whole notion of sharing your life. I have talked with folks that don't, in typically older generations, they weren't raised that way, and predominantly in Anglo communities, they think you just go to church and people will be good, and our young people today, they want to know why. They want to know what it looks like to live your faith. And I think you brought that alive through Convivio and Synodality. And so I just want to thank you so much for that. And so, Carolina, we are so excited for your response today. So please take it away, my dear.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm gonna share screen. So hold on just a second. I'm getting there. Okay. So now, hold on just a second, please.
There's the little icon on the bottom that looks like a presenter, if you want, on the bottom right. Looks like a stand, like a, I don't know what it's called.
Yes, I
Yep, there you
found it. Well, I'm brand new with this, so thank you for your patience. And I would like to start by taking just a brief moment to express how grateful I am to God, to you, Dr. Lemon, to you, Professor Castillo, for giving me the opportunity to be here with you. It is an honor, and it is truly a miracle for me to be here. So I appreciate it, and I'm very thankful. Thank you very much. And well, with that said, I'm gonna get started. And so, well, the basic Hispanic act, it's depicted in the most frequent words that Pope Francis says, and those words are encountering, listening, and discernment. Those three words are also the basis for the Convivio, as was explained by Professor Castillo. And in this sense, I support um, I support Professor Castillo on his claim that Convivio is the correct Hispanic response to polarization in the church. Professor Castillo explained that Convivio is a locus theologicus, where life-giving opportunities are offered to the needy. And in those terms, another example of Convivio is the Guadalupe event. And so there, in the Guadalupe event, our Blessed Mother, more than appear herself to Juan Diego, she had an encounter with him. As Roberto Goizueta explains, the Virgin of Guadalupe encountered Juan Diego, who thought of himself as an insignificant, a simple nobody, a wordless nobody. And through that encountering, the Blessed Mother elevated Juan Diego's dignity when she repeatedly called him the most beloved of my little ones, or the dearest of my children. When she treated him with the greatest possible respect and love, Juan Diego found his dignity. And he recovered his identity as a child of God, and he recovered and rediscovered his value as a person. And so the Virgin of Guadalupe is still conviviendo with us. She is still sharing with us because she stayed for us in Juan Diego's tilma, which is the indigenous cloth that they used to wear. And she followed, the Virgin of Guadalupe, follow her son's example, incarnating in the mestizos people. The mestizos people is the mix of the indigenous with the Europeans, in this case, Spanish people. And so the Virgin of Guadalupe truly and fully incarnated into the mestizo people to the point of interacting with Juan Diego in his native language, which was Nahuatl. And her appearance, as you can see, is similar to the mestizo people, and her clothing is full of the indigenous symbology, and all this makes her enculturation complete. And so she dwells among us as the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And so I would say that our Hispanic culture is rooted in the encountering of our Blessed Mother with Juan Diego. So now we have arrived at the second word most frequently used by Pope Francis, which is listening. Professor Castillo shared with us how las patronas listened to the immigrants' clamor and how they responded actively to it. And similarly, but in a most perfect way, the Virgin of Guadalupe listened to the clamor of the indigenous people, and she listened and responded to Juan Diego's necessity by healing his sick uncle. And Juan Diego, in turn, corresponded to her by listening to her petition and responded to it. And now it is Juan Diego who calls her mi niña, mi pequeña, which means my little girl, my little one. Now it is Juan Diego who listens to and responds to that listening. And so in this way, we get to the third word, the most frequent word used by Pope Francis, which is discernment. Now, the Jesuit Patrick Goujon tells us that discernment is to be connected, is to be attuned to God's love, and it is to be attuned to the way God acts in our world. He also says, Patrick Goujon also says that discernment leads us to gratitude and to serve others. And so Pope Francis, we all know he is a Jesuit, and consequently, discerning is ingrained in his thinking and in his acting. And so there are three basic actions to a good and efficient discernment. These are feeling, praying, and acting. Feeling, it's more than just sensation. It is the connection between my being, others, and God. In the Guadalupe event, Juan Diego felt the connection between him and God through the mother. And then he felt the connection with the other through the bishop at the miracle of his tilma. And in the other example, the patronas felt the connection with the needy and with God. And in this sense, Monsignor Oscar Romero used to say that we must sentir with the church, which is another way of saying to feel with the church. And so we must be open with one same heart with the other. Polarization should not exist. If we are heart with heart, regardless of our differences, we are called to do so, to feel with the church. The second action of discernment is praying, but it's not a simple prayer. It's to pray in a practical activity, seeing through the lenses of our relationships. More specifically, it's a practical activity, seeing through the lenses of our personal relationship with the Holy Spirit. And so it was Juan Diego's relationship with the Holy Spirit what helped him to overcome his insecurities, and it helped him to be brave and to be persistent on seeing the bishop when he was obeying our mother. And that same relationship with the Holy Spirit was the inspiration for Las Patronas to share their things and to help the needy. The third action of discernment is acting. And acting is to interpret God's action in our lives. In this way, that impulse from Juan Diego's obedience became a transformative action for the mestizos people, which has lasted through the generations until us. And likewise, the patronas interpreted God's action in their lives by serving others. And at the beginning, they did it in a spontaneous fashion, and then they got organized, but they acted. They interpreted God's action in their lives. And so we can see now how the basic Hispanic act, which is represented first in Juan Diego and then in the patronas, as the example that Professor Castillo was telling us, is condensed in those three most frequently used words by Pope Francis: encountering, listening, and discernment. And coincidentally, those three words are also the basis of the synodal process. And so we were hearing that Professor Castillo was saying that Convivio in synodality encourages openness and encourages us to respond to our present challenges. And in this regard, I would like to just briefly comment that I am just a simple, ordinary Catholic mother. I just decided to study a pursue is a master study only to be well prepared to respond to my children's and my children's friends' questionings. Um, I don't have any official position in the church. However, I am a witness of how Convivio is the right Hispanic response to the challenge of polarization in the church. I am a witness of that. And in my parish, which is what I could share, my parish, St. James the Greater in Tupelo, Mississippi, the Hispanic community has had a successful encountering with what I call the older sister, which is the English-speaking community. Our parish has become a community of communities, as Hosman Ospino expresses. In my parish, the bilingual events are truly encountering moments where the other, the one that is different to me, is listened to, where we live a discernment that leads us to serve one another. And don't get mistaken, there are many differences among us, too many to be counted for. However, as my pastor, Father Tim Murphy, who's depicted in that picture, he says, we grow through tension. And he's right. Just like that, little by little, step after step, in a process of encountering, listening, and discernment, which has made us brothers and sisters for over 20 years that the Hispanic community have existed in my parish. We have, at the end, well, so far, we have redefined our communal Christian experience. Throughout these 2 decades, we have established bridges that take us all to share horizons. I love that expression of Ospino, share horizons. So these shared horizons are the true Christian Hispanic Convivio. In my parish, through our Convivio, serving one another and being different, or we could say, through the diversity inside our parish community, we have obtained the opportunity of encountering each other like brothers. It has given us the opportunity to know each other by listening, acting in a mutual service. I remember that when my family and I arrived at St. James in 2002, the notion of nominal Catholicism was non-existent to us. Nominal Catholicism is to register and to have an official membership in the parish. That was something completely new for us because we grew up, my husband and I, we grew up in a Catholic atmosphere where Catholicism was impregnated everywhere. It was everywhere. We breathed Catholicism. I met the first Protestant family when I was 14 years old. And I lived in this cultural Catholicism because the Catholic faith was lived in all the aspects of our lives, in our families, with our friends, in the community. We had processions in the streets with the whole support of the city, the whole support of the government. We were just Catholics living our faith everywhere. And this cultural Catholicism here in the USA, it's a legacy that we are bringing and that is integrated in the encountering that Hispanics live with the brothers and sisters of English language. Cultural Catholicism works as a bridge of faith and family that should be kept and should be cultivated because it consists of expressions and ways of life that teach humbleness and teach simplicity and the richness of our faith. Our cultural Catholicism, it's a basic element of Convivio, since it goes directly to the heart of the other. What I mean is, for example, our music, our popular religiosity, our food, our same traditional clothing. All those are experiences of diversity where God manifests himself. Excuse me. And finally, I would like to mention the invaluable action of the Hispanic women inside our cultural Catholicism. All the abuelitas, the abuelitas are the grandmas, the mothers, the aunts, the sisters, all of them set the religious tone at home. All of them are usually the basic first catechists in the parish. And generally, they are the first intentional Catholics who name what they believe in and explain why they believe it. And so these women, these Hispanic women, they are some of the main responsible parties ensuring that the community of Catholics faith, the Catholic faith goes through generations. In my parish, when our older sister, the English speaking community, welcomed the immigrant community and embraced our different ways of being Catholic, we all started to live a deeper encountering. At the same time, our older sister became a blessing to us. And she became a lighthouse which illuminates and guides us by and through listening to us. And consequently, just like Juan Diego, that he grew in trust, in discipline, and in self-confidence, we have done the same. And so now all that growing in confidence has allowed us to become the one who listens and the one who serves. And the discernment process has helped us as a community to flourish as a servant community. And now the Hispanic community in my parish has become a gift for the parish because we are bringing the convivio, we are bringing our popular religiosity, and we are bringing the increasingly learning of theological reasoning of the faith that they, our older sisters, are teaching us. So thank you very much. I come back to you, Tracy. I'll stop sharing.
Oh, that was just wonderful, Carolina. That was fantastic. So thank you so much. I love, my mother had when I was younger, she had such a devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And so when I was a kid in middle school and high school, I studied so much about, how people were trying to like test the garment, and all that kind of stuff. And so I kind of grew up with a love for that as well. And I am just enamored with the way that you could bring Juan Diego's story alive through the lens of synodality. And so I'm so grateful for you for doing that for me personally in my faith life. But that really struck a chord for me. But I love also in the end, you were talking about, the women that are in Hispanic communities that are the ones that are passing on the faith, the women, La Patronas that Dr. Castillo was talking about, they're the ones passing on mercy and justice, and food, and so the powerful role of women in, a post-colonial, very Euro-American centric, United States that we live in, I think needs to be raised up every day. And I think you two did such a brilliant job of that as well. So I drew that out of your talks as well. So enough about me. Apologize for that, but I got real excited, y'all. I think we have a series of questions coming in the chat here. So I'm just going to go ahead and read them and field them to you both. So I'm going to read them fully because they're wonderful, congratulatory as well. So bravo, Dr. Castillo. Thank you for your fascinating and much needed lecture. And thank you, Mrs. Fierro, for your thought-provoking response. Dr. Castillo, I am interested in hearing what ideas you have about how we can implement the convivial approach in a practical manner in our local communities. I think this is a great question. I know the convivial approach will look different in communities like Las Patronas engaging in Convivio in a way that meets a major need in their community. What kinds of concrete convivial events do you believe can get people with differing ideas and worldviews to listen to each other, empathize, and see each other's humanity?
Wow, that's a beautiful question
Really
indeed.
is.
Yes. I'm thinking specifically, when the reference what Carolina says, she quoted the Gospel of John, where and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and that's what convivio is. Convivencia means to live in, to live with. Um, and the Jesuits, we talk about, well, we are a Jesuit institution, and the Jesuits have this. It's an integral part of the formation. Those that are discerning evocation with the Jesuits, they are embedded with the communities where they work, where they minister. So to me, you cannot understand fully a community, a group of people, if you do not live with them. So I find it interesting. The Pope wants una iglesia en salida. I don't know how to translate that. A church that goes out, than to go out to the peripheries. But I'm saying when we go out, we're there to stay. We're there to stay with the people. So convivio in practical terms means that I am not an outsider, that I'm not a foreigner, that I am not someone who's implanted there, but ministry means that I like one of my professors used to point out to us that that passage from the Gospel of John and the Word became flesh and pitched his tent. Okay, and so he was here to stay. So convivio means that yes, it's all the conviviality and the joyous and the celebration and the fiesta that both Maduro and Goizueta talk about. But it also means that I am embedded with that community. I am part of that community. I'm thinking of the Jesuits in El Salvador in 1989 that were killed. They were from Spain. I'm thinking of their writings, and not only the writing, the theological writing, the philosophical writing, but the fact that they gave their lives for the people of El Salvador. So that's what convivio means. That's it's not, oh yes, I'm just here to minister and then I go back to my ivory tower or I go back to my parish. That I am practically living with the community. Carolina mentioned Archbishop Romero, and that's again another example of what convivio means, to the extreme, obviously. But his motto of sentir con la iglesia, typically, I mean, that's translated from the Latin sentire cum ecclesia, and I always say that we take that to mean that we should obey or be of one spirit with what the church teaches. But St. Oscar Romero demonstrated for us that it means that I am willing to identify with those who I minister to the point where if my life is demanded of me, I give it up. So so to me, that's what convivio means. So it is our ethical action that is put into practice. Our contemplation, we have to be contemplatives, but that put that into action. And I love to quote another great Hispanic theologian, Ada Maria Isaci, who defines prayer as to struggle for justice is to pray. So that's what convivio means.
Thank you, Dr. Castillo.
If you let me, I just would like to say an example of a practical convivio, very simple. We had a pastor a long time ago who didn't speak any Spanish, and he would just appear, and he was always very busy, as they are. And so he would just enter in the classroom where we were gathering, and he would say, "Hola, adios." And that was enough. For us, that was convivio because he was connecting, you see. And so convivio is to have that intentional Catholicism that you want to connect with the other. That could be, you don't need much to have the experience of convivio.
Oh, that's beautiful. Just the desire, just the
Mhm.
desire to try, just to try. That's wonderful. I love that. We'll take one more question. We're a little over time, but if you guys want to just stay on, another 5 or 6 minutes, we have another question that we have a comment. You're welcome to read it. A beautiful comment by Jane. And then Tom Ryan wrote, one of the themes you mentioned, Dr. Castillo, was lo cotidiano, the everyday. If I'm saying it right, because I'm the worst at pronouncing even my own name. I can't even spell it sometimes, but we won't go down that road. So he writes, I often think of religion as about the extraordinary and not the everyday. Can you say more about that? How does the concern, and then also for Carolina, how does the concern for lo cotidiano show up at St. James in Tupelo?
Well, I think Carolina just hit on convivio, meaning the everyday, the presence. It's how do I live my faith on the everyday? God is encountered. We encounter God in the concreteness of life. In the other, it just so happens that a lot of the communities, the marginalized communities, it's easier, I would say, when we encounter God in the other, in poverty, in the victims of injustice. But to encounter God in lo cotidiano means that I don't have to do extraordinary, things to minister, to tend to the needs of the others. Not all of us, thankfully, not all of us are called to be martyrs, such as the Jesuits in El Salvador or Saint Oscar Romero. It doesn't have to be to that extreme, but it is the fact that my everyday commitments could lead to that point of martyrdom, but it is in the identifying with the other on the concrete, on the everyday. And again, going back to Pope Francis, the spirituality of the everyday that he talks about in his writings. It's how do we live that call to holiness in my everyday life, in the concrete, in the small things. And it's funny because for Pope Francis is something as, saying, please, thank you. And I forget what the other one is. I'm sorry. Please, thank you. And I forget what the other one is. It's that, it's in the everyday, it's in the small things. And that's where we encounter God as well, not just necessarily in the extraordinary. So, and to me, it means that, and I think Las Patronas really exemplify that in the sense that it is that first encounter, and this is what I needed, and they don't, for example, they hear the cry of the people, please feed us, and then they just give the food. That they're literally carrying food, and they just share that with them. So to me, that means that you're contemplative in action. You see what the reality is, what is, like I was stating, and then you respond. And then you may have time to meditate, to pray about what you did, but it is that demand that needs to be addressed right here and right now.
Yes, I would like just to share an example of lo cotidiano. Um, we had, when I was with the eighth graders, giving classes to them on Wednesdays nights, I had this assistant, and he spoke good enough English to just basically communicate, but he was not confident in giving a lesson or nothing else. But he was very loyal, and he was there every Wednesday. And little by little, he felt at home and started doing the initial prayer and the ending prayer in English. And he started participating little by little. And so that is the cotidiano. It's in the little way that you can do the things, do them with love. And then you are living lo cotidiano in your life, being at church, being at home, but do everything that you can, do it with love.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think that helps. I want to put Jeff's question out here too, because I think it's a good one, and it's something that a lot of people are kind of experiencing when there's a lot of closing with churches and reshuffling. And so Jeff put in the Q&A, he said, "Do you have any suggestions?" Because I think you're touching on it right now, Carolina. Do you have any suggestions for developing convivio when one is assigned to a parish in the next city over from where they live? Like it's you don't live there, so how do you? That's a real technical question, but a really good, real one,
Well,
That's my sign. It is a good question.
it is a good question. It is a good question. And we can only do our best in that sense. I think that people appreciate presence, and I think Carolina alluded to that reality where it takes such a small effort just to have the ministry of presence. I think, and people appreciate that, even if my other language is limited. If I make the effort, people appreciate that, and if I can be present in one place, and the reality is now there are parishes that are being closed, and we don't have enough ministers to tend to all the people of God, and people appreciate that's difficult. There was a visiting priest in my parish that said that he traveled in Nigeria 8 hours in motorcycle just to go celebrate the Eucharist in one place. So I cannot imagine riding a motorcycle for 8 hours in the mountainous areas in Nigeria to celebrate Mass, but people appreciate that, and which is I think that's a very we follow the example of Jesus. I mean, and Jesus, as you know, I mean, he himself needed time to go out and pray and meditate and reflect and rest. But we cannot be everything for everybody. But just the fact that we try, I think people would appreciate that. And to me, that's convivio. To when I'm willing to share my life.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great way of putting it. Even if you can't be fully a part of the community, because of geographic issues, you don't live there, but can you be present and can you share of yourself? Can you create hospitable space with the way that you invite people to be their full selves, where they are? So I don't know if Caroline, if you want to share. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, I just wanted to say that just by smiling and greeting people, there you are building a very warm space, and God is there. God manifests through the simplicity, and so one way that in my parish has worked a lot to connect everybody, not just different language people, but the whole community, has been organizing convivios. But in this case, just an afternoon, an evening of small testimonies. And so who is serving would share, why do I serve? Why am I a catechist? Or why am I in the choir? In just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just sharing why. And that opens over others' understandings and connects directly heart to heart. And it has truly worked in our parish. And so these evenings of sharing, people that are not even part of the parish, they come to these evenings. But being open and greeting and smiling people that we don't know, it's sometimes that it's hard because it's going out of our comfort zone. But that's the way to do it. I mean, that's the way Jesus would do it.
Yep. Isn't that the truth? Amen. Well, y'all, I am mindful of our time, and I just want to thank you all from behalf of Loyola University and Loyola Institute for Ministry for being our speakers this evening and for sharing your profound wisdom and your spirituality with us. Thank you both so much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I want to do a few announcements. I'm going to drop a whole bunch of things in the chat, y'all, and I'm going to go over them. So the recording, there's the link right there. This will be up in a few days, probably sometime next week. definitely consider studying with us. I mean, you can see our LIM graduates are dynamos. You know, all three of our lecture series have had an alumni responder. So they're all powerful, powerful ministry leaders in their contexts. And we were honored to have them study with us. And so if you feel called to ministry, we have a Bachelor of Arts in Ministry and Theology fully online for adults that want to do professional ministry. It's a degree completion program. We take a whole bunch of credits. We have a Master of Pastoral Studies, a Master of Religious Ed, and we have a whole variety of graduate and continuing education certificates. We have a Spanish formation program. We have an English formation program. So definitely check those out. We have a variety of initiatives. One's for high school youth. One is for religious sisters in the Gulf South. We have an initiative where we are raising up the next generation of Hispanic ministry leaders in graduate education called Haciendo Caminos. We have a young adult project where we're enacting synodality with parishes to do young adult ministry. And we have a whole new project with another grant on actually embracing synodality in parishes, and that will be a national project. So your parish could be one of them if you want to learn some skills and practices of really becoming a synodal church. Let me know. Email me and we will contact you. So thank you all for coming tonight. And one last thing, we have two informations coming up. One is on April 16th. And that one, we have, no, that's not correct. Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. So our April 16th is our Spanish LIMEX information session. If you know people who are called to study in the Spanish language and want to do that in a real communal way, but also online at a time that works for them, please join us on April 16th. Dr. Castillo and I will be there. And so you can definitely, and here's the link for both of the information sessions, English and Spanish. And so on April 29th at 7 o'clock, we are going to have an English information session. So here is the link for registering for either or both of those. And finally, we have joining us very soon, in just a week and a half, April 22nd, on campus and in Ignatius Chapel. So it's going to be hybrid. We're going to have a webinar and on campus. Dr. Tim O'Malley is coming. He's the Director of Education at McGrath Institute for Church Life and the Academic Director at Notre Dame Center for Liturgy. And he's going to unpack his forthcoming book, Behold, Believe, Become, Encountering the Hidden Christ at Mass. So that is going to be at 7 o'clock in Ignatius Chapel here at Loyola, also streamed as a webinar. So there's the link to join right there. And again, please email me if you have questions or you want to learn anything more about studying with us at LIM. I would be happy. I'm trying to put my email in chat and I can't talk at the same time. That might be right. So feel free to contact me if you want to study with us and reach out in any way. Carolina, Francisco, thank you so much for your time tonight. And thank you all for joining us. It was wonderful to have so many people here from so many places. We had an international group tonight, so I'm delighted about that. Thank you both again.
Thank you.